You've been told to just think positive, haven't you? But what if I told you that this advice might actually be making your anxiety worse? Sounds crazy, right? The truth is, fighting your thoughts head-on isn't the solution. It's the trap. If you've ever felt like your mind is running a marathon you didn't sign up for, or that no matter how hard you try, you can't escape the cycle of overthinking, you're not alone. But here's the good news. Breaking free doesn't have to take months of therapy or endless self-help books. In this video, I'm going to show you one simple mindset shift that can stop the spiral today, ready to finally take back control. Isolation is one of the most silent yet powerful ways depression takes hold of someone's life. People often withdraw from friends, family, and even themselves, not because they want to, but because they feel hopeless and overwhelmed. Social interactions, which once brought joy, now feel like insurmountable tasks. For instance, a simple invitation to meet a friend can feel like climbing a mountain, leaving them fatigued and irritable. This self-imposed solitude often stems from intrusive thoughts whispering, "You're better off alone," or "No one really cares." But the truth is, isolation only deepens the sadness, creating a vicious cycle that feels impossible to escape. For some, this isolation can stretch on for weeks, even months, without them realizing how much time has passed. Days blur together, and the world outside their safe bubble feels distant and uninviting. They might convince themselves it's better to stay restless in their own space than risk the fear of being judged or misunderstood. Imagine someone avoiding a family dinner because the thought of answering, "How are you?" feels unbearable. This avoidance isn't laziness or selfishness. It's the weight of depression making even the smallest interactions feel monumental. Breaking free from isolation starts with small, intentional steps. It could be as simple as texting a friend, stepping out for a short walk, or even sitting in a cafe, surrounded by strangers. These small actions can remind someone that they're not as alone as their mind tells them. But here's the tricky part. Isolation often leads to disorganization, both mentally and physically. When your surroundings mirror the chaos inside, it's easy to feel even more stuck. Let's explore how this disarray can further complicate the journey through depression. Disorganization is often an overlooked but telling sign of depression. When someone feels overwhelmed and hopeless, even the simplest tasks, like tidying up or putting things back in their place, can feel impossible. Over time, clutter begins to pile up, turning their living space into a reflection of their inner chaos. A sink full of dishes, laundry left untouched for weeks, or a desk buried under papers can leave them feeling even more fatigued and irritable. It's not just about laziness. It's about the mental disorder robbing them of the energy and motivation to keep things in order. This disarray doesn't just affect their physical environment, it seeps into their mental state as well. A cluttered room can lead to cluttered thoughts, making it even harder to focus or make decisions. For example, someone might struggle to find their keys in the morning, which spirals into frustration and guilt, reinforcing their pessimistic thinking. The cycle is exhausting. The mess feeds their depression, and the depression feeds the mess. It's like being trapped in quicksand, where every attempt to fix things feels like sinking deeper. But here's the thing, starting small can make a world of difference. Instead of tackling the entire house, they could focus on one corner, one drawer, or even just clearing off a single table. These small wins can create a ripple effect, slowly restoring a sense of control. However, depression doesn't just stop at disorganization. It often takes a toll on personal hygiene as well. Let's dive into how this manifests and why it's so misunderstood. Poor hygiene is one of the most misunderstood symptoms of depression. To the outside world, skipping showers, wearing the same clothes for days, or neglecting basic grooming might look like laziness. But for someone battling depression, these tasks can feel like monumental challenges. The exhaustion and lack of motivation that come with depression make even brushing their teeth or washing their hair seem overwhelming. Imagine waking up feeling so fatigued and hopeless that the idea of standing under running water feels like an impossible feat. It's not about not caring, it's about not having the energy to care. This struggle often leads to feelings of guilt and They might look in the mirror and think, "Why can't I just do this simple thing?" A thought that only deepens their sadness and self-esteem. Over time, this cycle of neglect can create a sense of disconnection from their own body, making them feel even more irritable and restless. For example, someone might avoid social gatherings because they're embarrassed about their appearance, further isolating themselves and reinforcing their intrusive thoughts. Breaking this cycle starts with compassion and small, manageable steps. Instead of aiming for perfection, they could focus on one small act of self-care, like washing their face or changing into clean clothes. These tiny victories can serve as reminders that even in the darkest moments, they are capable of taking care of themselves. But depression doesn't just affect hygiene. It also wreaks havoc on sleep patterns, leaving people feeling trapped in a cycle of exhaustion. Sleep is supposed to be a time of rest and recovery, but for someone with depression, it often feels like a battleground. Insomnia keeps them awake at night, their mind racing with intrusive thoughts and anxious worries about the future. On the flip side, some may sleep excessively, using it as an escape from the sadness and hopelessness they feel during the day. Yet, no matter how much or how little they sleep, they wake up feeling fatigued, as though their body and mind never truly rested. It's a cruel irony. Sleep becomes both a desperate need and an elusive goal. These disrupted sleep patterns can have a domino effect on their daily life. A restless night might leave them irritable and overwhelmed, unable to focus or make decisions. For example, they might struggle to get out of bed in the morning, leading to missed responsibilities or canceled plans. Over time, this lack of structure can worsen their mental state, feeding into feelings of guilt and It's not just about being tired, it's about feeling like they've lost control over something as basic as sleep, which only deepens their sense of helplessness. To begin reclaiming their sleep, small adjustments can make a big difference. Creating a calming bedtime routine, like dimming the lights, avoiding screens, or practicing deep breathing, can help signal to the brain that it's time to wind down. But even with these efforts, the mind of someone with depression often catastrophizes, turning minor worries into overwhelming fears. Sleep is supposed to be a time of rest and recovery, but for someone with depression, it often feels like a battleground. Insomnia keeps them awake at night, their mind racing with intrusive thoughts and anxious worries about the future. On the flip side, some may sleep excessively, using it as an escape from the sadness and hopelessness they feel during the day. Yet, no matter how much or how little they sleep, they wake up feeling fatigued, as though their body and mind never truly rested. It's a cruel irony. Sleep becomes both a desperate need and an elusive goal. These disrupted sleep patterns can have a domino effect on their daily life. A restless night might leave them irritable and overwhelmed, unable to focus or make decisions. For example, they might struggle to get out of bed in the morning, leading to missed responsibilities or canceled plans. Over time, this lack of structure can worsen their mental state, feeding into feelings of guilt and self-hatred. It's not just about being tired, it's about feeling like they've lost control over something as basic as sleep, which only deepens their sense of helplessness. To begin reclaiming their sleep, small adjustments can make a big difference. Creating a calming bedtime routine, like dimming the lights, avoiding screens, or practicing deep breathing, can help signal to the brain that it's time to wind down. But even with these efforts, the mind of someone with depression often catastrophizes, turning minor worries into overwhelming fears. Sleep is supposed to be a time of rest and recovery, but for someone with depression, it often feels like a battleground. Insomnia keeps them awake at night, their mind racing with intrusive thoughts and anxious worries about the future. On the flip side, some may sleep excessively, using it as an escape from the sadness and hopelessness they feel during the day. Yet, no matter how much or how little they sleep, they wake up feeling fatigued, as though their body and mind never truly rested. It's a cruel irony. Sleep becomes both a desperate need and an elusive goal. These disrupted sleep patterns can have a domino effect on their daily life. A restless night might leave them irritable and overwhelmed, unable to focus or make decisions. For example, they might struggle to get out of bed in the morning, leading to missed responsibilities or canceled plans. Over time, this lack of structure can worsen their mental state, feeding into feelings of guilt and It's not just about being tired. It's about feeling like they've lost control over something as basic as sleep, which only deepens their sense of helplessness. To begin reclaiming their sleep, small adjustments can make a big difference. Creating a calming bedtime routine, like dimming the lights, avoiding screens, or practicing deep breathing, can help signal to the brain that it's time to wind down. But even with these efforts, the mind of someone with depression often catastrophizes, turning minor worries into overwhelming fears. Catastrophizing is like having a mental magnifying glass that zooms in on every negative detail, making it appear far worse than it actually is. For someone with depression, this habit of pessimistic thinking can turn a minor inconvenience into a full-blown disaster in their mind. For instance, forgetting to reply to a friend's text might spiral into thoughts like, "They must hate me now," or "I'm such a terrible person." These exaggerated fears create a constant state of anxious restlessness, leaving them emotionally drained and unable to focus on anything else. This pattern of thinking doesn't just affect their emotions. it shapes their behavior too. They might avoid taking risks or pursuing opportunities out of fear that everything will go wrong. Imagine someone declining a promising job offer because they've convinced themselves they'll fail and embarrass themselves. Over time, this mindset reinforces feelings of hopelessness and self-hatred as they begin to believe that nothing good can ever happen to them. It's a mental trap that keeps them stuck in a cycle of fear and inaction. Breaking free from catastrophizing starts with challenging those exaggerated thoughts. Asking questions like, what's the worst that could realistically happen? Or is there evidence to support this fear? Can help ground their thinking. Writing these thoughts down and comparing them to reality can also be a powerful tool. However, depression doesn't just distort thoughts. It also disrupts habits, including the way someone approaches food. Depression has a sneaky way of interfering with eating habits, pulling people to two extremes: overeating or losing their appetite entirely. For some, food becomes a source of comfort, a way to fill the emotional void left by sadness and hopelessness. They might find themselves mindlessly snacking late at night, not because they're hungry, but because it's a temporary distraction from intrusive thoughts. On the other hand, others may feel repulsed by food, their appetite disappearing as they sink deeper into feelings of fatigue and self. Both patterns leave them physically drained and emotionally overwhelmed. These eating habits often create a ripple effect on their physical and mental health. Overeating can lead to guilt and self-criticism, while appetite loss can result in weakness and irritability. Imagine someone skipping meals for days, only to feel too restless and anxious to focus on anything else, or someone eating an entire bag of chips in one sitting, then spiraling into self-hatred for losing control. These behaviors aren't about a lack of discipline. They're symptoms of a mental disorder that distorts their relationship with food and their own body. To regain balance, small, intentional steps can help. For those overeating, planning structured meals and practicing mindful eating, like savoring each bite, can make a difference. For those struggling with appetite loss, starting with light, easy-to-digest foods like smoothies or soups can be less overwhelming. But depression doesn't just rob someone of their appetite or energy, it also drains their motivation to engage with life. Lack of motivation is one of the most paralyzing symptoms of depression. Tasks that once brought joy, like hobbies, socializing, or even getting out of bed, now feel impossible. It's not just about being lazy. It's about feeling emotionally dead inside, as though the spark that once fueled their passions has been extinguished. For example, someone who used to love painting might now stare at a blank canvas for hours, unable to pick up a brush. This absence of drive leaves them feeling hopeless and fatigued, trapped in a cycle of inactivity, and this loss of motivation often leads to a withdrawal from life itself. Days blur together as they spend hours in bed, scrolling aimlessly on their phone or staring at the ceiling. Even basic tasks, like responding to a text or making a cup of coffee, feel overwhelming. Over time, this behavior reinforces their feelings of guilt and worthlessness as they begin to believe they're failing at life. It's not that they don't care, it's that depression has drained their energy and ability to care, leaving them restless and irritable. Rebuilding motivation starts with baby steps. Instead of focusing on big goals, they can aim for small wins, like making their bed or stepping outside for 5 minutes. These seemingly minor actions can create a sense of accomplishment, slowly reigniting their drive. But depression often convinces people to avoid problems altogether, making it even harder to face responsibilities. Avoiding problems is a common coping mechanism for those battling depression, but it often creates more harm than good. When someone feels overwhelmed and hopeless, even small responsibilities can seem insurmountable. They might ignore unpaid bills, avoid difficult conversations, or procrastinate on work deadlines, hoping the problems will somehow resolve themselves. But instead of disappearing, these unresolved issues pile up, creating a mountain of stress that feels impossible to climb. It's not about being careless, it's about feeling too fatigued and anxious to face reality. This avoidance often stems from fear of failure, fear of confrontation, or fear of making things worse. For example, someone might avoid opening an email from their boss, convinced it contains bad news, only to later discover it was something minor. The longer they evade their problems, the more irritable and restless they become, trapped in a cycle of guilt and self. Over time, this behavior reinforces their belief that they're incapable of handling life's challenges, deepening their depression and sense of hopelessness. Breaking this cycle requires taking small, manageable steps toward addressing problems. Instead of tackling everything at once, they can start with one simple task: like making a to-do list or addressing the easiest issue first. This gradual approach can help rebuild confidence and reduce the overwhelming weight of responsibilities. However, depression doesn't just lead to avoidance. It also fuels intense feelings of guilt and self-criticism. Guilt and self-hatred are like constant shadows for someone living with depression. They often blame themselves for everything, both real and imagined, believing they're the root cause of their problems. A missed deadline, a forgotten birthday, or even feeling sad can spiral into thoughts like, "I'm a failure," or "I ruin everything." This relentless self-criticism chips away at their self-esteem, leaving them feeling unworthy of love or happiness. It's a cruel cycle. The more they criticize themselves, the deeper their depression becomes, and the harder it is to break free. These feelings of guilt often lead to behaviors that reinforce their negative self. For example, someone might avoid reaching out to a friend because they feel they've been a bad companion, only to later feel even worse for isolating themselves. This self-sabotaging behavior creates a loop of sadness and hopelessness where every action or lack of action becomes another reason to feel unworthy. Over time, this guilt festers, feeding intrusive thoughts and making them believe they're beyond redemption. To combat these feelings, it's crucial to practice self-compassion. This can start with small affirmations, like reminding themselves that mistakes are part of being human. Journaling about their emotions or talking to a trusted friend can also help reframe their perspective. But guilt and self-hatred don't exist in isolation. They're often fueled by a constant state of fear. Living in constant fear is like carrying an invisible weight that never goes away. For someone with depression, this fear isn't always tied to specific events. It's a persistent, nagging feeling that something bad is always around the corner. They might fear failure, rejection, or even success, convinced that no matter what they do, it will end in disappointment. This fear keeps them restless and anxious, making it hard to take risks or embrace opportunities. Imagine someone turning down a dream job because they're terrified they mess it up. It's not the job they fear, but the possibility of confirming their own self. This fear often leads to self-sabotage, where they unconsciously ruin positive situations because they believe they don't deserve happiness. For example, they might push away a loving partner out of fear that the relationship will eventually fail. Over time, this behavior reinforces their feelings of hopelessness and self-hatred, creating a cycle that's hard to break. The fear doesn't just hold them back. It convinces them that they're safer staying in their comfort zone, even if that zone is filled with sadness and exhaustion. Breaking free from this constant fear requires challenging the stories they tell themselves. It starts with small acts of courage, like saying yes to something they'd normally avoid or reminding themselves that failure is a part of growth. Fear thrives in isolation, so surrounding themselves with supportive people can also help. But here's the thing, fear doesn't have to control their life forever. With the right tools and mindset, they can start to reclaim their power. Now that you've seen how these patterns affect your life, the question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you ready to take the first step toward breaking free from anxiety and self-doubt? Or will you let these habits keep controlling you? Remember, change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with a single decision, your decision. So, which of these strategies are you going to try first? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts and support your journey. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a chance to learn more about taking control of your mental health. Your future self will thank you for it.